Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. So today I have the Mama Elephant Summer Days stamp set. I also have beach tickies for the sentiment. We have Lawn Fawn's stitched hillside borders. I'm kind of going old school with this card. I also have the stitched wave borders from Lawn Fawn, which are just like a gradual, gentle wave. And then the largest of the large stitched rectangles from Lawn Fawn. I have brushed corduroy, antique linen, tumbled glass, salty ocean and mermaid lagoon for my ink today. I also have some white embossing powder. This is a Stampin' Up one, but I've had this one for so long I'm not even sure it works properly. And I believe they can go off, which I didn't realize at the time. So it worked out fine today, but just so that you know, sometimes they do go off. So if you're having trouble with that, it could be that could be one of the issues behind it. And I'm going to use some Versamark ink, which is a clear sticky ink for those who don't know. And it's kind of like a glue ink, if that makes sense. But it basically helps to stick the embossing powder just to where you stamped. So I'm just gently getting the ink on the stamp. I'm also going to use a powder tool. This is an EK Success powder tool. And this one actually is really nice because it smells like baby powder. So, but if you don't like that smell, then don't sniff it. But this one does smell nice. You can use corn flour as well. Just lightly dust it with a cotton wool ball, and it'll do the same thing. So I've stamped that onto my cardstock, and then I've put the embossing powder over it, and then let the excess fall, and I lightly tap the excess off. Don't flick it, because if you flick the back of your cardstock, I've found that doesn't help either, because you basically ping all that embossing powder off, or a lot of it, and then you don't get a nice impression, or at least a nice embossed image. So I don't emboss very often, but I'm trying to force myself to do that more often because I do have trouble with it. So one of the tips that I do is I start at the back of the card to really warm that card up. Bear in mind it's got to go through the cardstock, so it's not necessarily, if the cardstock's thick, it's going to take a little while to heat that embossing powder. But once I feel like it's warm enough through the back, then I'll come in the front and just quickly go over it. Don't hang around too much over the top of your embossing powder, because it will burn. You can burn it, or it can land up almost like sinking into the cardstock, which I've had before, which is why I've given up on the on the embossing powder thing for a little while, or heat embossing. So yeah, I'm learning more and more, and I've been doing this for many years and I'm still learning. So yeah. The cardstock I'm using as well is, I believe this one is a W.H. Smith watercolor cardstock. I actually really like their watercolor cardstock. It's cheap and cheerful, but it's thick and it's nice to work with. So I started off with a blending brush. These are just ones I got off Amazon, I think. And so they are craft blending brushes, but they're not super expensive kind of thing. But because I wanted quite a good amount of colour, even though it's a very light colour, the tumbled glass, I decided to switch out and use my Tim Holtz tool, little mini round foam applicator tool. And I feel like I get more coverage with this as opposed to the blending brushes. The blending brushes are great if you want a really soft kind of look, but I wanted a bit more intensity to my colour, and obviously where the embossing is and the tumbled glass being quite a light blue, I needed to get quite a bit more on there so you can actually see the image. If you're using darker colours, that shouldn't be a problem, because the white of the embossing powder will, or the, what you've embossed, will just show through, and it'd be really, really nice. Then once I've done that, I do take a cloth and just wipe over the top of the embossed area, because that will resist the ink will resist that, because it's heat embossed. So it will just wipe off nicely. And then I also have two of the wavy borders that I used. Again, this is the same cardstock throughout this whole thing, except for the images, but I'll talk about them in a bit. So I decided that because I wanted that more intense look, and I'm having a bit of a thing about my the handles, I call them my handles, but the applicator tool from Tim Holtz, the mini ones, the little round one, So I decided to grab them out for for quite a few cards, and I've actually got a whole load of them in front of my desk, sort of in front or the top of your screen if you like, all set out with colours that I want to use for Halloween. So keep checking back for that, because the first one will come up this week, I believe, of my holiday series. I started that last week, but you know, that was a Christmas one. Anyway, so I just got some of the one of the blues. I can't remember now which one it was. I think that was the Salty Ocean on the like smaller wave, and then on the larger wave I've got the Mermaid Lagoon, and I'll go back and forth until I'm happy with the colours. I just wanted that variation of blues in the background. You know, it's like when you're on the beach, which I would love to be on the beach right now, but when you're on the beach you have all these various colours of blue that you, not colours of blue, but like the shades of blue or whatever you call it. And it's just so stunning. So I was just trying to get some variation there, and also it creates a bit more depth having different, almost like different layers of colours, even if you don't add any foam tape to this. So those are my two waves, if you like, and the sky. And then I'm going to ink up the third piece, which is, or fourth piece I suppose, which is the going to be my sand. So I'm using antique linen and brushed corduroy just for a bit of highlight, or not highlight, I suppose, to give a bit of depth. I love antique linen for sand. So sand colours, antique linen is a great colour for that. And you can use a darker shade. So you could use the brushed corduroy, and almost if you put a bit of it on your mat, you could add some water to that and flick that on instead, just so you've got that variation of that, you know, like again the colours that you get in the sand. Some are darker, some are lighter, but antique linen's a good one for a sandy colour to start with. And then, like I say, I'm adding the brushed corduroy as well. What I also did, which I should have mentioned, is I cut all of these layers. I cut the largest stitched rectangle first, and then I cut the layers out so that once this is together you'll have stitching all the way around. So I just thought I'd mention that in case you were wondering how I got them exactly the same size. That's the other reason I did it, because it makes it easy for that. Then I spritzed all of them with some water, because obviously they are watercolor paper, so it'll handle some moisture, which is another reason for using this. I think watercolor papers, which I'm experimenting with, but not just watercolor papers, but Bristol Smooth, especially for things like your zig markers, and now I find that on the Tombow markers also work really well on the Bristol Smooth. They're sort of like go-to cardstocks. So once you, and I say experiment as much as you can. Some less expensive cardstocks and watercolor cardstocks or mixed media cardstocks, whatever they are, they will, some of the less expensive ones will be fantastic, and some of them will be crud. So just work with what you have and keep trying until you find one that works, and then stick with that, because if you know it works, you're not going to have any problems going forward. But I like to experiment. So for me, W.H. Smith, which is just a local stationer here where I am, their watercolor cardstock is fab. I love it. So what I'm doing now is adding my layers in. So I've got the, I suppose, taller of the, or smaller wave. I stuck that down flat to the background. And then for my next layer, I'm going to add some foam dots just to give some depth again, to give you that dimension of the ocean being further away. So the smaller the wave, it was further away. I don't actually know if that should be right that way around, but that's how I did it. So I kind of imagined the slightly larger waves would be on, like, breaking the shoreline, and the less wavy ones, if you know what I mean, will be in the distance. I don't know, maybe it's the other way around. I can't remember when last I went to a beach, so you know. And then for the front panel, I'm doing the same thing. The idea behind these first two, the sand and the first lot of waves, is also so that if I've got any of my images I want to stick sort of in, like tuck it behind, as if it's in the sand or in the water, then I can do that because I've got that space. If not, just don't add your double-sided adhesive right along the edge of those pieces, and then you'll still be able to tuck things in. You might have to use something just to lift the cardstock a little bit so you can sort of get that image behind it, but I added a load of not adhesive, foam dots instead, and that's just even easier. Again, it's just depth. So now's the fun part, although sometimes I find it frustrating, fun part, and that is to work out where you want to put all your images. And this is kind of like making up a little story or a picture book or whatever you want to call it. Now, if I had done this on a slimline card, there would have been a lot more room. These guys have huge heads, but because I love them so much, I had to stamp color and cut out all of them. So I literally just did one of each image. And I used, I believe this is actually Nina cardstock, but I used some stamping cardstock basically, and an ink and my Copic markers, so alcohol markers, to colour them in. It was just the easiest way for me to colour them in. Obviously I've done that off camera to save some time, but I just love them. I'm obsessed about this. This is an old stamp set from, I don't know when it was released, but it's good. I want to say 3 or 4 years maybe. I don't know, don't quote me on that. It's a very old stamp set, so but I've only had it for about, I want to say a month maybe. I finally got hold of it. But I love their big heads, and it's the same with the, I did a Christmas card last year before maybe, where I've used 2 of the Christmas themed ones where the artist does these characters that have these huge heads, and I'm obsessed with them. So yeah. So in the end, you'll see, I'll actually put the little bear onto the inside of the card because I didn't want to waste it. I had him, and he was the last sort of character, the last piece that I just couldn't get to fit on the front. So he went on the inside. But I love that there's so many different things. I didn't have to do this. You don't have to do this at all. You can just use one, stamp and colour and cut out just one character, and, the tree and the little crabs and things like that. You don't have to do all of them like I did. But it's cute. So just, like I say, figuring out where to go, where to put them. For the tree, because we have like 2 layers of foam because of the sand, and then the layer of sea behind, or ocean, the ocean wave behind that. When it came to the top of where the leaves are on the tree, I had to double up the foam, so that just keeps it level. So you'll have double foam behind the leaves, and then on the trunk that's sitting on the sand, it's just double-sided adhesive. That way your card stays as level as possible, even though you've got all this dimension on it. Otherwise it gets a bit wonky. So, and then this little bird, I'm thinking seagull-ish of some kind. I decided that he was floating on I think it's a coconut shell, I'm not sure. But I decided it was a coconut shell that he's floating on, or sitting on, that's floating in the ocean, like you do. And then the other one I'm going to put in the tree. And then there's the little pig in the front who is drinking his, I'm going to say cocktail, because I'd be having one of those on the beach. Anyway. And then I have the little crabs and that I'm just trying to add in. You've got the bunny who's having his little, what's that stuff called? Watermelon. And then the little guy in the middle, I think it's a cat, who is playing with his sandcastle and his bucket, and he's got his little spade. So I just think it's so sweet. So, and the sentiment reads, sending you lots of sunshine. I thought that was apt considering they're on the beach. The other thing I could have done, and I may still add it to it, is to add maybe a sun in the top right hand corner, because I feel like it's a little off balance now in the top section. Like there's not quite enough, or I need some birds. I could always draw some birds. Do you remember when we used to draw birds that looked like an M sort of thing? Like a stretched M, the letter M, and add something like that in the sky, because I feel like there's something missing there. So that's just an afterthought. So something I'll need to add in there. But this is where I was trying to get this bear in, and I couldn't get this bear to fit anywhere. Yeah, so in the end, I stick them on the inside. I think, well, sometimes I don't often do anything with the inside of my cards because, well, I just don't. So I thought he could just sit on the inside and it'd be fine. It looked cute. And then I'm going to just add some fairly strong adhesive to the front of the card, and then just add the whole piece. It'll fit across the front of the whole card front, if that made any sense. And so I'm just trying to line it up. I usually turn it upside down. I open the cards and turn them sort of upside down and back to front. I don't know why, but in my brain it just helps me line them up better than if I try and line it straight up onto a folded card. Yeah, issues. Anyway, so there you go, guys. It's pretty simple as far as cards go. It's a bit old school with all the layers of the dies and that, but I love it, and I hope you did too. And we're still in summer, so happy summer. And I'll see you later. Bye.